Welcome to Crawlspace. Tonight, we have our favorite author on. Isn't that right, Lance?
He was my favorite author before I realized that he was my favorite author, right? Jon Ronson. Jon Ronson, the author of The Psychopath Test, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, Frank, The Men Who Stare at Goats, Lost at Sea.
It's really an honor.
It really is. I mean, you don't get to speak to someone who's been on the New York Times bestseller list.
I remember seeing The Men Who Stare at Goats at the Sherman Oaks ArcLight back when it came out in 2009 with an old coworker buddy. So
We've known of Jon Ronson for a long time, and if you haven't heard the name, you will, especially if you like podcasts, because he's got a new podcast that's coming out.
The Butterfly Effect with Jon Ronson is coming to Audible on July 27th and every other podcast app in November. So you want to get the Audible app, and it's free.
But this is a guy who's been around the industry, who immerses himself in the topics that he covers in an incredibly impressive way.
Right, and the topics that he covers aren't anything that you see on the front page of the papers. These topics that he covers are things that you use and you view and you experience on your everyday life. And you don't realize where they came from or how important they are or how much they influence you. And it all started with one thing. It all started with one person's idea, probably very simple. And then, hence the butterfly effect. It's very impactful once that catches on.
And The Psychopath Test is one of Jon's books, and it is the best book I've ever read in my life, the most entertaining book I've ever read, and my favorite book. And if you're into the things that we're into, psychopaths, psychology, getting into the heads of darkness, like the minds of dark people, like this is the book for you, but it's funny. It's incredibly funny, and Jon is just a very funny guy.
Very funny and delicate, and he dances around, you know what he's saying, and he dances around it, but he does it in this charming, delicate way and funny way. And you said that the Psychopath Test is something that we can relate to because of the topics, the subject matter that we discuss. It's also about like the duplicity or the duality of man, right? Where Jon even says that he got caught up in how to identify a psychopath, and he got power hungry. He got kind of drunk with power on how to identify a psychopath. So you have these people who have no empathy, and then you have somebody who's got a ton of empathy, getting drunk with power, identifying these. It's this whole like situation that happens because he has immersed himself so deep into these stories and into the topics and the world that these people create. The Psychopath Test, it was one of the most entertaining books before we knew about Jon Ronson, before we knew that he listened to the podcast and thought we were adorable.
Right. So part one of this interview actually aired on Missing Maura Murray earlier this week. So if you want to hear part one of this interview, which we talk a little bit about some of his recent works, a film called Okja, which is amazing. Check that out. That's on Netflix. We also talk about Maura Murray a little bit. So if you want to hear that chat with Jon, check it out on the Missing Maura Murray podcast. This episode is specifically more about psychology and some of his other writings and works, and a little bit about Trump, but it's not really political. So please save your political tweets. We're not talking about politics. We're talking about Trump as a person.
Honestly, it's really tough to talk about his books that are called So You've Been Publicly Shamed and The Psychopath Test and the subject matter in there. And we'd be doing a disservice to our listeners if we didn't talk about politics, because what he's written about years ago is directly relatable to what's happening right now.
Yeah, but we really don't talk about politics.
No, we don't. We actually try to stay away from it.
We just talk about the personalities in politics.
Exactly. What I meant with it would be a disservice is that this is why Jon writes these books. It's almost, it is very like, and I might have said it during the interview, it's very Orwellian the way he writes these books. He writes The Psychopath Test. He writes Them, the one that he gets involved with extremist groups, The Elephant in the Room. So it's not so much like we had a political conversation. It was more like the books that he's written a couple of years ago were extremely perceptive to the situation that this country's at right now.
Also, check out our live show. We are doing a live show in the Boston area in Somerville, Massachusetts' Davis Square at the Rockwell Theater, 10 p.m. on August 18th, a Friday night. Jordan Bonaparte from the Nighttime Podcast is coming down from Canada to join us for this very special live show event.
And we have two special guests to announce. The co-founder of the Satanic Temple, Lucian Greaves, is going to join us, as well as Elise from the Cryptid Antiquarian blog, where we'll talk a little bit about the vanishing men of Boston who are found dead in water. So you are really going to enjoy this live show. Come out. There's a link to buy tickets in the show notes. It's not very expensive. The tickets are limited because there's only 200 seats in the theater.
Theater's super cool. There's a restaurant, a gastro pub right next door called Saloon. That's like it's like a speakeasy. Davis Square is probably one of the coolest little neighborhoods outside of Boston. To get there is super easy. You just take the public transportation, or you could drive in. There's a couple of free lots down there, or street parking. Take the red line to Davis Square and just walk 100 feet down to our theater. It is a little bit later on, just because that's how we roll. Because we don't do prime time. We're too cool for the prime time. We do a little bit after prime time.
Also, if you want to come down for dinner or drinks before the show, we are going to do a little bit of a meet and greet from 7:30 to 9 at the Saloon there, which is right next to the Rockwell Theater. And so we're going to be setting up for the show from 9 to 10, and then the show starts at 10. So from like 7:30, 8 to 9, we're going to be out there hanging out with you guys, having a few drinks, getting some dinner.
Not cleared with the restaurant yet, but probably.
Yeah, it's probably going to be fine.
Yeah, it'll be
I mean,
fine.
I'm not saying it's going to be an official thing. We're just going to be there hanging out.
And our conversation with Jon Ronson took place in Audioboom, and Audioboom is the platform that we release these podcasts on. They host us. They have built a new studio in downtown Manhattan. It's gorgeous. It is functional, and it is state of the art. And they were gracious enough to allow us to meet with Jon Ronson for a couple hours and talk about all of these. I mean, we could have stayed there for like 5 hours. It was the staff there is amazing, and Talia was equally amazing and pretty amusing with her fan crush on Jon Ronson.
Follow us on Twitter at Crawlspace Pod, and follow Jon Ronson on Twitter at Jon Ronson. Thank you very much for listening.
I do want to shift gears a little bit to talk about the concept of a psychopath, and the concept of trolling. And if you think there's a difference, maybe a year ago, I was playing around with the notion of there being a difference between a psychopath online and being normal.
Yeah, I did a little bit of, I remember when I was writing So You've Been Publicly Shamed, at one point I went back to the psychopath checklist and thought, is the internet turning us more psychopathic, just as a species? And I sort of came to the conclusion, actually, not that much. Like, of the psychopath checklist, there's only a couple of items which kind of, which relate to the way that we behave online. I think we do become less empathetic online, no doubt, when, we dehumanize people, we bully people for ideological reasons, not just trolls, but in a way, trolls interest me less than people who bully people for more complicated ideological reasons. So You've Been Publicly Shamed, one of the, I guess, the sort of centerpiece stories about this woman called Justine Sacco, who tweeted, just before getting on a plane to Cape Town, tweeted, "Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white." And thought she was doing a kind of South Park joke, like that everybody would get. When I say everybody, like her tiny number of Twitter followers, like 100 Twitter followers, everybody would understand that she was making a joke, like making fun of her own privilege. But then when she was asleep on a plane, she became like the worldwide #1 trending topic on Twitter, and hundreds of thousands of people just destroyed her. And I'm more interested in those sorts of things because because the rationale is just much more there were certainly trolls got involved.
Yeah.
You know, somebody wrote, somebody HIV positive should rape this bitch, and then we'll find out if her skin colour protects her from AIDS. Or I'm hoping she gets AIDS, lol. There was enough of those, like
Right.
trolls who just enjoyed kind of jubilant online chaos. But other bullies did it for way more complicated reasons of social justice and wanting to show the other people in their circle that they were good people. So, you know, I'm going to destroy this bad person as a way of demonstrating that I am a good person, and so on. Yeah, I don't know why I went off on that tangent.
No,
It's fascinating,
It's
yeah.
fascinating, and it leads into other things, which is you find these stories, and you. When do you know? Is there something, because you must find dozens of stories. When does one click? Like the Pornhub one and this one. When does it click and you say, because a lot of what you're talking about is something that most people would read as like a headline and then scroll to something else, but you read something and you say there's way more to this.
Yeah, this really tells us something about the world. You're right, you're looking for that moment, and you stumble on it, you know. But with Justine, it was like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I was like one of a tiny number of people. That night, no one defended her. No one. Like not the mainstream media. It was like this, you know, this giant, this kind of Godzilla bully kind of had sprung up from the internet and was stamping on everything, and everyone was too scared to try and push back.
Right.
And all the pushback would just be somebody saying, "Hey,
can you wait till the plane lands?"
Yeah.
You know, that's just wait till the
she
plane
made
lands.
a bad joke."
Yeah. Or not even that. Like, I've got a feeling it may have been a liberal joke that was badly worded. Can we wait until the plane lands? Waiting until the plane lands was considered weakness that night, because the prevailing view was, we are so woke. This is amongst the left. Like, everyone destroyed Justine. The left, the right, trolls, misogynists, like everyone banded together to destroy Justine. But the left, who kind of interests me the most because I'm kind of from the left, although not that, you know, a less authoritarian left, I'd say, were like, we are so woke that waiting, like we know who she is and what she's thinking, even if she doesn't. And anything she says is going to be a lie because, you know, we know. So waiting for the plane to land would have been considered weakness that night. So when all of these thoughts like cascaded into me, I thought, God, this is like an important moment in like history. Like I and no one else can see it. Like no one else can notice that this is really fucked up and really important. Society has changed and it's crystallized in the destruction of this woman. So yeah, so I felt very excited, I suppose, to have noticed something that nobody else had noticed.
Right.
I say excited, but it was also very stressful. Like most of my stories, like I immerse myself completely, but they don't affect my mental health. This story, for some reason, like it snaked its way into my head.
Do you think it's because it's so relevant? Because of today, because of that?
And because it was us, like everyone, it was us doing it.
Yeah.
Like with, I mean, I've told stories about white separatists being shot by the FBI. Like on a selfish level, I'm never going to be shot by the FBI. Like that's really not going to happen. So you can feel incredibly sorry for this person, and but there's always going to be a little bit of a distance. Like I am not a white separatist, and I'm not going to take my family to the top of a mountain in Idaho, and then, you know, piss off the local US Marshals and hoard guns and then get killed. Like that's not going to happen to me and my family.
That's what they all say.
So, but with Justine Sacco, it's like I am both Justine Sacco and I am also the people who tore Justine Sacco apart.
Right.
So I think that's why it snaked its way into me.
And we all could be one bad joke away from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, you know,
We make
are.
a lot of bad jokes.
Yeah, and it's so. Can I tell you a story of something that happened to me? I gave a talk at the Oxford Union, which is supposed to be like highfalutin. It's supposed to be like Hogwarts. And on the surface, it looks like Hogwarts. Like the room looks like Hogwarts. And anyway, I made this joke on stage. It was being live tweeted. This is just about how any of us are like one step away from being Justin Sacco. It was being live tweeted by this student who was like one of the people on the Oxford Union body. You know, the Oxford Union is like the kind of Harvard whatever. And so I kind of got on stage, told some stories, told the Justin Sacco story. And then during the Q&A, I said, like, you know, I suppose, and I said as a joke, I said, well, sort of a joke, it's like a nuanced point. I said, you know, one thing you can say for like Twitter is that, you know, schlubby white men like me finally know what it's like to be objectified, which is progress, I suppose. Anyway, I sort of chuckled to myself. Everyone in the audience laughed, and you know, it was like a joke and so on. Anyway, when I got into the car, I thought, I wonder how that live tweeting went. So it was like, Jon Ronson is taking the stage. Next tweet, Jon Ronson says white men are being objectified. Jon Ronson's leaving the stage. That was basically it. And I had to phone up the Oxford Union and like yell at them, like, you know, did you not just listen to my fucking talk? So they deleted the tweet, but not before. I'd say 200 or 300 people were like, look at this.
Look at how close you just danced on the edge of being what you write about.
Yeah.
You know, you just like if that could have stayed there, and then you could have been spending the rest, like a better part of your career,
that joke over and over and
right,
over
and going on
again.
like shows and saying, "I'm not saying this, guys. It was a joke. I'm sorry." It's
and no
crazy.
one in the room, like no one in the room, took that line for anything other than what it was, which was a joke.
Yeah.
But of course, on the internet, you know, decontextualized. What a nightmare. What a fucking nightmare we've created for ourselves. On social media, you know, the thing of what social media could have been, and still is to an extent, is a place, a window into other people's lives. You know, I follow people with mental health problems with 100 Twitter followers, and I follow people with 8 million Twitter followers. And the thing I loved most about social media when I first got onto it was how egalitarian it was. Like, I would find somebody who's had like a difficult life, and they're so funny and interesting, and they've only got 100 Twitter followers, but, you know, their voice is coming onto my computer in the same way that, you know, somebody with 10 million followers, Katy Perry or Rupert Murdoch, is like this extraordinary window into people's lives, and it's egalitarian, and it's about curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
But we took this thing of curiosity and we turned it into a thing of judgment and destruction. And you know,
and control too, and
censoriousness,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I truly believe that all of us on the right and on the left, you know, with this hard, cold judgment, it was like we all polluted the lake, and then what emerged from the polluted lake like a mutant fish is President Trump.
I was like you were saying that, and that I had the visual of this like frogman coming out, and then and then all of a sudden he grew like this comb over.
Yes,
this blonde comb over.
Exactly. Yeah, I want to say to the people who, you know, tore apart Justin Sacco, it's like, you know, Breitbart and InfoWars propagandized the hell out of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time you did this, Breitbart went crazy on it.
Mm-hmm.
And some middle American guy who personally I think would have voted for Bernie Sanders, who spoke to their concerns, saw what the left was concerned with, and the left was concerned with just tearing apart somebody who stepped out of line, even in the smallest way. And they thought, well, that doesn't speak to me.
Right.
Bernie Sanders might have spoke to me, but this doesn't speak to me.
Right.
I'm voting for Trump.
Right. Yep. There's a huge portion of people that thought just like that. I was watching something with you know, Dan Savage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he described the people, and I mean, it's his own opinion, but he described that group of people as like knuckle dragging America. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to convince a segment like that to think in a way like it's easy.
Trump is the monster that we created.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And if he wasn't president of the United States, it'd be no problem for people to just say, "What is this troll doing?
Yeah.
What is this troll doing?" I mean, he's a troll. He's a troll. He's the biggest troll in the world right now.
He is.
And
So are you guys, to bring it back to Maura Murray, are you sort of you think about trolls and stuff because they've become a big part of your life since you started doing this podcast?
Yeah, and it's fascinating too. I never thought that we would encounter as much hostility in the beginning. We don't so much right now. Actually, I have a couple emails that I'll show you when we're done that I got yesterday. But it started off as like you took them seriously, and then you don't, and then you just become fascinated with them.
Yeah, I feel like it's a classification thing too with the word troll. Like
yeah, it's a pejorative term.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I would say, like going back to my Justin Sacco story, I would say that a lot of people who tore apart Justin Sacco didn't tear her apart because they were trolls. They tore apart because they genuinely thought that they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Right. So you have people who think they're doing the right thing, especially with the true crime genre. They think they're doing the right thing by coming up with a solution for the case.
So, but then are trolls just trying to amuse themselves?
There's certainly some people who just kind of do it, you know, for I mean, they may have their own kind of issues, but you know, but who doesn't? Who are doing it just for, you know, because they think sort of online chaos has its own reward.
Oh yeah, yep. I think people get off on that. People get off on the, you know, they don't have I'm just generalizing, but I imagine they don't have a lot of power outside of the online community, and then they get into their online community, and it's literally anything they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's other people who kind of do it kind of for ideological reasons. I mean, some 4chan people, you know, there's a sort of anarchy to it, that some people do it because they, you know, they sort of see themselves as sort of sowing kind of anarchic chaos.
Right.
Like I know some of the 4chan people a woman called Mercedes Hafer, for instance, who was nearly put in prison for hacking into PayPal, and that's what she would say, that she does it as part of this sort of, you know, spreading chaos for sort of ideological reasons.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways, especially the ones that we run into, like they don't necessarily see the outcome. You know, like they don't see how we deal with it. So how is it gratifying to them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe they just enjoy it from inside their own heads.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell. Like, there's some people who are happy to know that it's really hurting other people, but then there's other people who have to psychologically trick themselves into thinking that's not the case. I noticed this time and again. Going back to Justin Sacco, I asked the guy who started the campaign against her while she was asleep on the plane, like, how did it feel? And he said, it felt delicious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then he said, this is a Gawker journalist, quite a well-known journalist. And then he said, but I'm sure she's fine now.
Because is he justifying it? Is he?
Yeah, because he's playing a trick. He's playing a psychological trick on himself.
Yep.
Like, he can only be okay with what he did if he can trick himself into thinking she's fine now. I noticed this actually the other day with the guy Otto Warmbier, the guy who died after coming out of North Korea.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When he was arrested, a bunch of commentators were like, you know, serves him right for being, you know, privileged and a bro and a, you know, alpha male. But they would have to caveat that, because you see him sobbing uncontrollably in court.
Yep.
So that doesn't fit with serves him right. So they have to caveat it by saying it was crocodile tears. If you look, you'll see the phrase crocodile tears.
Yeah.
And they don't say that for no reason. They maybe don't realize the reason why they're saying that. But the reason why they're saying that is because of cognitive dissonance. They don't want to see themselves as a bad person, so they have to pretend that they haven't done a bad thing.
Yep.
Why can't people just admit they're wrong? And why can't we all admit that there's gray in life and nothing is black and white?
Well, yeah. I tell you who was good at this, I think, was Obama. I think Obama was warning about all of this. He gave a number of speeches where he said the centre is dying, everybody's retreating to their corners, you know, you should watch out, the centre is dying, and things could get worse. Well, you know, things did get worse.
Yeah. I mean, there's many historical figures that have been talking about that for years, and they do they come across it in a different way. Each person does. And Kennedy talked about it, and Malcolm X talked about it, and they both have their different platforms and their different processes to deliver that message.
Yeah.
But it is it's not a gradual death. I mean, it is a gradual death. It's
Yeah.
not an instant death.
I mean, my one hope is that, you know, having Trump as president might at least, you know, show everybody what it was that we've been hurtling towards these past 3 or 4 years. And here you go. You know, this is what happened.
Yep. And as ironic as it is, we're experiencing exactly what democracy is.
Yeah.
You're not going to get away. You're not going to get away with that.
Yeah.
You're here by the people, for the people, and you can say fake news all you want, but you're not going to get away with it.
Yeah, and my hope is when all this is over, maybe people will. I mean, I say this because I'm a moderate. I mean, my natural place is being a moderate, and I'm just hoping that this will make people, you know, remember that being a moderate isn't that bad.
Right? Yeah. I just hope in like 3.5 years. We're not having another conversation where I'm like, remember when I said he's not going to get away with it?
Yeah.
We're in for another 4 years.
Oh, God,
but
can you imagine?
Well, we could be talking about Russia, that whole the whole story there in a couple of years. I don't know. Where do you stand on that? Do you think there's validity to that story?
I had a drink the other night with a sort of high up journalist on a high up newspaper, and he said to me, we're all getting a little bit worried that there's no story here and it's going to come back and burn us.
Right.
Who knows? I don't know.
But didn't
I don't think they know either.
right.
I think that he was basing that simply on like more stuff should have come out by now if it was going to come out.
Yeah, and I don't see where I wrote down we're going to have Trump political talk in my
Sorry,
notebook,
I know, sorry.
but I'll keep going with
Yeah.
it. You look like you're on a mission.
I'm always on a mission.
What mission is this one you're on? Because I see it. You're almost like salivating.
My mission is to find the best meal to cook for me and my family tonight.
To make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone as well?
Yeah, I'm going to cook with Blue Apron, obviously.
Your mission is just like Blue Apron's mission. Good for you.
Seared chicken and creamy pasta salad with summer squash and sweet peppers. I think that's what I'm going to cook tonight.
That's what you should cook tonight. Doesn't that sound really summery?
Oh, it's perfectly seasonal.
Seasonal, yeah. Nice and light, you know, satisfying. I mean, these are the things that Blue Apron does. Blue Apron also has a very strong impact on the community. They've established partners with over 150 local farms, fisheries, ranchers, all across the United States. That seared chicken could have been right down the street from you.
There's a bunch of chicken actually right across the street, but I hope it wasn't one of them.
It's probably one less now.
For less than $10 per meal per person, Blue Apron delivers those seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals.
And it's guaranteed, right? Blue Apron's freshness guarantee promises that every ingredient that they send to you, every pre-portioned ingredient in your delivery arrives ready to cook. If not, they'll make it right.
So check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/crawlspace. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait.
Don't wait to go to blueapron.com/crawlspace because you know Blue Apron is a better way to cook. We have to be really careful about the information that's being put out there because recently every news organization assesses all the information, all the tips that come into them, all the leads that they get, and I think it was Rachel Maddow who just looked at some information that seemed like it was very much linking Trump to Russia, and they looked into it and they vetted it and just determined that it was fake.
Right.
And it was coming right on the heels of the CNN reporters who were they resigned because of that. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's some media machine that's feeding information that the left media wants to hear so that they go ahead and print it or say it, and then it comes back around like that's not true.
It's possible. I mean,
and that's very Orwellian, and that's very
they're very Machiavellian people. I mean, Roger Stone, who's deep in the background, who I've met, extremely Machiavellian person. This is the way that they think.
Yeah. I have tried to watch that documentary, and I just finished it recently, but it took me three tries.
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
Give me Roger Stone.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether he's a genius or whether he's. I mean, is he a psychopath?
Well, I'll tell you what I can tell you about Roger Stone, which is that he's the man who brokered the meeting between Donald Trump and my old friend Alex Jones. And when I was covering this, I wrote an ebook last summer called The Elephant in the Room, which was about Alex Jones's relationship with Donald Trump, because I've known Alex Jones for like 20 years. And I was sort of piecing together just sort of how it worked, like how their meeting worked. And it was through Roger Stone. And I said to Roger Stone, this is going to backfire on you, right? Like, you know, because Alex is crazy. Alex Jones is crazy. He believes these crazy things. And if you align Alex Jones with Trump, it's going to backfire on you. And he was like, no, it's not. And he was right and I was wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty certain that Alex's base of however many million people, 3 or 4 million people, who probably wouldn't have voted if Alex hadn't told them to vote for Trump, you know, maybe they swung the election.
Wow.
Either way, I was certain that Trump aligning himself with Alex would repel more people than it attracted, and it would be more proof that Trump wouldn't win the election.
But Roger Stone had some sort of, he was tapped into something.
He was.
Where he knew,
he was.
It's actually going to help.
He was very confident
that
this was going to help.
Crazy.
What, one more thing on the Trump thing.
Okay.
When he tweeted modern, you know, I'm not presidential, I'm modern day presidential in caps. Isn't that like kind of a backwards way to look at it? It's only because he's the president can he call himself modern day presidential. Like if I took people who worked at Baskin Robbins and I went in there with a gun and said, this is motherfucking modern day Baskin Robbins, like I wouldn't be wrong.
No. I suppose the one thing Trump is doing, like I listened to Pod Save America, and you know they always sound exasperated when Trump does something kind of unreconstructed and, you know, writes a tweet that doesn't go through a committee, and you know that seems to be working for people. Trump just speaking his mind. I mean, the fact is, it's, you know, for all the awfulness that it entails, tweeting from your gut, however corrosive your gut is, seems to be more popular for a lot of people than tweeting after the tweet's gone through a committee.
Yeah,
right.
And
so maybe that's what he meant by modern day presidential.
Or do you think that he was expressing some sort of cognitive dissonance right there?
Well, he's certainly very good at seeing the world through his prism of you know, the power of positive thinking.
Right.
Growing up in Manhattan, his preacher was Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. And Trump has spoken a lot about how Norman Vincent Peale, you know, who was this kind of huge, you know, like, you know, Power of Positive Thinking was probably his biggest success is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And, you know, later on, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And I think, you know, Trump has found a way to see the world in a Norman Vincent Peale way where everything that happens is positive.
And if it's not, then it's fake.
Yeah, if it's not, it's just people out to get him.
Yeah.
So a couple of weeks ago, I was in the city here and met with an old friend of mine who is now high up in the business world, and he works at one of the top investment banks in town, and he's got a high position up there. And I told him that we were coming down here in a couple of weeks to interview Jon Ronson. He wrote the Psychopath Test, which basically says, or it looks at the idea that there are a lot of psychopaths high up in the business world. And he goes, psh, like that. And I said, that's definitely true. And I just thought it was interesting that he didn't think it was true, but yet he's surrounded by these people.
Well, the statistics, according to Robert Hare, who's like the kind of father of modern day psychopathy research, who's kind of widely admired, is that you're 4 times more likely to have a psychopath at the top of the business world than at the bottom. You're 4 times more likely to have one in the boardroom and not in the janitor's room. But I think in certain sectors anyway, the kind of quick kill sectors, what they're not good at, psychopaths, they're not patient people. They don't really kind of assiduously build up a business over over many years. They're not Richard Branson. I mean, I think everybody who's incredibly successful has some sort of psychological issue that propels them up there. But for a lot of them, it's not psychopathy. I think you'll find a preponderance of psychopathy in the kind of business which is all about a quick kill, like get in, make a shitload of money, and then get out again.
Yep.
Those are the companies where you're going to find psychopaths, so hedge funds, for instance, is the kind of thing. But yeah, it's plausible when you look at the checklist.
Yeah.
So many of the items on the checklist are rewarded by certain sectors of capitalism. Quite often it doesn't work out. Quite often these are people who then get mired in accountancy fraud, and the shareholders regret ever making them the CEO.
Right.
Because psychopathy quite often equals malevolence.
Right. Yeah.
And they're impulsive and they're irresponsible. Those are two items on the checklist. So I think a classic corporate psychopath would be somebody who goes into a business, like wows everybody, becomes the CEO. Everybody is very charismatic, makes a hell of a lot. Behaves in this very ruthless way, makes a hell of a lot of money for the shareholders. But then after 6 months, it all collapses. And they may emerge unscathed and go and do it again in another company.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, do you see a correlation between genius and being a psychopath? And how do you categorize Stanley Kubrick? Because I know you've had some experience with him and his work and his family.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time up at the Stanley Kubrick's house in England. I made a documentary called Stanley Kubrick's Boxes.
Which, can you tell me where to see that? Because I'm trying to find it.
Oh, you know what? Vimeo just took it down.
Yeah.
I've got it on my computer. I wonder whether I should put it up on Vimeo, but then I'm breaking my own copyright, and I'll probably get into trouble with Warner Brothers. If I've got the guts, I'll do it.
Yeah, I don't want to put you in a position.
Well, I certainly don't think Stanley Kubrick was a psychopath. Psychopaths aren't patient, and Stanley Kubrick was incredibly patient. Okay, there was a story about a guy called Jack Abbott, who was in prison. I think he murdered a man. He was in prison, and Norman Mailer discovered him in the 60s and thought this guy is like a genius writer in a sort of alpha male. He's so tough. He speaks it as it is. He gets to the heart of the prison mentality. This man's a genius. So he petitioned the parole board to get Jack Abbott released from prison. And the parole board were like, whoa, Norman Mailer. So they released him. And
can't wait to see where this goes.
Yeah. So the first night he goes to a party in Manhattan with I can't remember who was there, but it was all highfalutin people from the New Yorker and the New York Times, I think, society photographers, and they all kind of toasted him. And then that night he left the party and went downtown, went to a diner, wanted to use the toilet, and the guy in the diner said, no, this is for customers only. So Jack Abbott said, can you step outside? And Jack Abbott stabbed the man to death.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's an example of somebody who... this guy at the diner who worked at the diner wanted to be an actor, and apparently in court Jack Abbott said, well, he'd never have made it as an actor. So here's somebody who is clearly a psychopathic, who was considered a genius writer by Norman Mailer. But I think in general, surely to be a kind of great artist you need empathy, and psychopaths don't have empathy.
That's a great point.
Well said.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, let somebody use your bathroom if you're a diner owner.
If you're a customer.
Yeah, especially a psychopath.
Yeah.
But anyone.
Right.
I agree.
Avoid problems.
Yeah, it's on the counter and it's struck to a big spoon. Just go in there.
No big deal.
It's no big deal.
Right. Don't get stabbed to death.
Only a psychopath would blame the victim quite as much as you just did.
Awkward.
But it was a long time ago.
Lance did score a 12 on the Psychopath Test at CrimeCon.
That's funny. I convinced myself for a while I scored a 15.
Because at CrimeCon I got everyone to do the test.
Yes. Actually, we both scored a 12.
Okay.
Yeah, and we both stood up in the back when you said stand up if you got a 10 or more.
Right.
All I was doing was looking at what Tim was doing. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm at 12.
But that doesn't make us psychopaths.
No. You need to be 26 out of 40. It's a 20-point checklist, but you score 0, 1, or 2. So the highest score is 40. Clinically, you're a psychopath. You're diagnosed as a psychopath if you score 26 out of the 40 in Britain. and 27 out of the 40 in the United States. So America is slightly more psychopath friendly than Britain. You're allowed to be a little bit more psychopathic in America.
One of the things you said during your discussion was if you're with somebody, if it's your significant other, and you look over and you see that they scored a 26, just leave immediately.
Yeah,
don't worry about hurting their feelings because they don't have any anyway.
Yeah, that's what a Harvard psychologist called Martha Stark once said to me. If you're married to a psychopath, leave. You can't hurt their feelings because there aren't any feelings to hurt.
Right. Yeah.
So bleak.
It is bleak, right? Yeah.
But Maura Murray, there's no chance she was a psychopath, right? Or sociopath.
I mean, I think it would be a huge coincidence if she was. I mean, there's already a lot of coincidences in this story. I think that would be yet another one. No, I don't know. I mean, I don't know very much about her, only what I'd know from your podcast and James Renner's book. But no, she just seemed like a normal person.
Yeah.
To circle back with you being up there in New Hampshire and what you do as your journalistic style, immersing yourself. There's been a number of people who have tried to do that with Maura's case, and they just see too much darkness. What do you think where do you think the drop off is there? Where does it become too dark for some people, and some people can handle it and make that separation?
Honestly, for me, darkness wouldn't be a factor as to whether I was going to do the story or not. For me, it's resonance. It's like the story. I kind of think every story that I do is about something, and then it's about something. It's a really interesting story in itself, but then it tells a wider truth about the way that the world works. Those are the stories I'm always looking for. So when I was up in New Hampshire with James, that's, I suppose, what was in the back of my mind was, the story has to not just be about what happened to Maura Murray, it has to be about something else. And I'm still wondering what that is.
What that is.
Yeah. But, I'm kind of chilled out. Like I think you have to be chilled out. You have to just sort of do a story that intrigues you. Sometimes it will stick, sometimes it won't stick. But the only way of doing it, my friend Adam Curtis, the documentary maker, he's like one of the world's greatest journalists. And he said to me one time, you go off and do stories, just do stories, and something will come out of them. And I think that's really good advice. Just, when you're in the middle of doing a story, you don't even need to really think about what does this mean. Just do stories, and something will click. And sometimes they won't. Sometimes it will fall by the wayside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's amazing advice.
Yeah, because I've done a lot of very, very dark stories, and sometimes they are too dark. Let's circling totally back to the beginning of this conversation. Okja has a very, very dark ending, but Bong Joon-ho managed to turn the darkness into something sort of haunting and beautiful as opposed to off-putting. So maybe it's how you tell the story. I think you can tell a very, very dark story, but you have to be good enough, smart enough to tell it in a way that matters to people, that's meaningful.
Especially when it's something that's like what you work on it. These are actual events that happen. These are actual life-changing events. Something that, so you've been publicly shamed.
Yeah.
These, like we said, we made kind of the half joke, like we're all one bad joke away from.
Yeah.
So you could tell that story as it's like terrifying, terrifying, like bleak world, or you can tell it the way you do, which is there's an underlying sense of humor there.
Yes.
Keeps people. There we go. It keeps people not as dark. So when you get into these dark situations, there's always this bit of humor that you can turn to.
Yeah. Although more than my other books, Shamed is more kind of tense reading experience.
Yeah.
I got my other books are really just funny and bouncy and charming. I hope. Whereas with Shamed, I thought I'd try something different, which was to kind of write a horror movie.
Yeah.
Where the anxiety that I felt writing the book is on the page, and it's and people feel it in their own heads. And I'm quite pleased that I managed to add that string to my bow.
Yeah, it's just I don't want this to happen to me. It's basically when you're
Right.
reading.
Yeah.
This is a cautionary tale. Be careful.
Yeah.
Tim.
It's a
But also-
social media horror story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a horror story.
Yeah.
It's like it's creeping terror. I never managed to explain the book properly to people. Like, I think people thought they were reading like an issue book, but in fact, what they would read if they read it would be, it's like the Blair Witch Project. It's
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
scary,
Yeah.
and it's like a beach read. It's like the girl on the train.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do most of my books recently through I'll listen to them through Audible. So I recently I realized that I didn't have a physical copy of Psychopath Test, and I went to Barnes and Noble. And do you know where you're categorized, by the way?
No.
Like, I looked everywhere, and the guy was like, "Oh, it's upstairs, the little corner over there. It's popular psychology."
Oh,
That's pretty cool.
I don't mind that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't mind popular psychology.
Yeah.
I mean, when a book is backlist now, when a book is frontlist, you're on the front table. It would be terrible if you're not. But when it's backlist, it's okay for it to find a little home in popular psychology. The Minister at Goats was a New Age, which pissed me off.
It was a New Age?
Yeah, that really annoyed me.
I can see that. Yeah.
But in Britain, I'm in Waterstones, I'm in smart thinking. There's nothing better than that.
That's a category
Yeah.
over there?
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
wow.
It's
It's
I
not
think
a Barnes & Noble, right?
No.
No. I went into the humor section. I
Yeah.
went into like essays. I went into,
Right.
and then I went up to the guy because that's my last resort, is
Right.
to talk to somebody.
Well, I'm glad it was there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was, actually, I said, "What do you have by Jon Ronson?" And he stopped for maybe like 2 seconds, and he was like, "Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So you've been publicly shamed. I got the. Yeah. He was all about you.
Hey, good.
Well, shout out to Burlington Barnes and Noble.
How do you get the access that you get?
I mean, often I don't.
Yeah. Seems like you do. Reading your book, everything that it brings you from one thing to another, and then the next paragraph, you're talking to this person already.
I definitely think the books are they should be like rivers, like when, rivers find their way around stones, and not getting access used to kill me, used to destroy me. And I thought, you know what? No, just find another way around the stone. So the times when I don't get access, I just don't make it to the finished book. But the way I mostly get access is just to be passionate.
Yeah.
It's to be passionate, like to really care about the story, and I think that rubs off on interviewees.
Yeah.
And that's always been the way. I've always wanted to tell stories that I really want to tell.
Yeah. And you're a very likable guy in person, so I imagine when you meet these people that you write about, they enjoy the conversation with you.
Yeah, I think so. And they like the fact that I've really done my research and that I am passionate. I think that's got a lot to do with it. Now that I'm more well known, I think that sometimes helps and sometimes hinders, but it probably balances itself out. I mean, I think some people, like when I first started, I spent a year with an Islamic militant in London called Omar Bakri Mohammed, and I don't think he would ever have let me in my life if I was well known.
Right.
The fact that I wasn't was what. So it hinders, but then it helps. Like I've just done this year in the porn community for this show, The Butterfly Effect, and I think the fact that I was well known helped. I think they were happy to have like a sort of well known journalist on porn sets.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do people get mad at you at times?
Oh yeah.
Because you're honest, and so sometimes you don't paint people in the best light. You paint it the way it happened, and the way you felt at the time.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. People do get mad sometimes, and I never like it. Like I don't consider myself, because you're right. I'm honest, so and I'm honest about my own failings, just like you guys are. So I sort of think, well, it's fine. We should just all be honest together. That's why I miss the Twitter of curiosity, and when everybody was just honest, and everybody was like, oh, it's okay, be honest, it's cool. Now if you're honest, they fucking kill you. But yeah, sometimes people get mad, and it makes me upset, and it gives me sleepless nights. It's the last thing I want to do is to upset people. But it does happen sometimes, and then I come up with my own cognitive dissonant reason to not feel bad about it. But I do feel bad about it. I do.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't feel bad.
Yeah.
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 What the last question I have here, and thank you very much, Jon Ronson, for joining us here today, and thank you very much to Audioboom for letting us use their studio and showing us around. They're really cool.
Thank you.
Who slagged you off on this show.
I don't want to. Yeah, I know. I mentioned it in a DM to you, but
Right.
but then you were like, "Who?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to remind you."
Well,
Because we don't know.
We said who after we looked up what slagged off, the definition of slagged off.
Right. Yes.
I think it's like some British thing, right?
Yeah, slagged off means attacked.
Yeah.
I was once attacked on your show, but
Really?
yeah, but
Really?
if
We
you
do not
honestly
remember that.
if
Yeah.
you can't remember it, then I'm not going to bring it up.
Okay.
I have a guess. I'll guess off air. I guess.
It wasn't
or
me.
let's just
Wasn't
guess
me,
now.
right?
If, yeah. Was it? It was the forensic psychology professor.
I don't want to talk about it.
It had to be.
Most people in the profession really like the Psychopath Test and see it as a
Oh.
really interesting cautionary tale about confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance, and appreciate the fact that I was an outsider coming into the world and looking at it with a fresh eye. Like most psychologists and psychiatrists really like the Psychopath Test, but then other people within the profession, but I'm glad to say it's a minority, don't like the fact that I'm an outsider who came in and I wrote a book about, confirmation bias and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And, so there's a small number of people who don't like the book, but I'm glad to say that most people in the profession really do. And when I do the show called Psychopath Night in Britain, where we play this big theatres, like 2,000-seat theatres.
Wow. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and lots of professionals come. It's like lots of care workers, psychologists, social workers, prison officers. Like it's a kind of busman's holiday for a lot of people in the profession, and they like it. So so the people in the profession who don't like my book, I'm glad to say are really in a minority.
That's got to be like an enormous sense of pride for you to put something out there and then have people in that profession who deal with it.
So much.
Yeah.
The same thing happened with the Monasteric Goats, actually. Loads of people in the military.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago that book came out now, but I got so many emails from like special forces soldiers and their wives and yeah, loved it. It is. It's a special source of pride when the people in the world that I'm writing about like it.
Yeah. Well, I just have one more thing, which is
for
to thank Audioboom for letting us use
I
their
did that.
studios. I want to personally do that.
Can I do it too?
And well, no, I mean the studios are amazing here.
Beautiful.
And we're just proud to be on their radar in any way. And thank you, John, for coming out and agreeing to do this. And thank you for your stories and for everything that you do, like in literature. It's phenomenal.
Oh, you guys, thank you so
And
much.
I just want to read a review of you that stood out. The Boston Globe once described you as this was Jesse Singal.
Oh, I like Jesse Singal, and I didn't know he's now with New York Magazine, and I didn't know that he'd ever written about me.
Oh yeah, it was Lost at Sea.
Okay.
And he said Ronson's desire to report on and attempt to explain human dysfunction in its various colorful forms. That you have this desire and you report on human dysfunction in its various colorful forms is such a cool way to put what you do.
Thank you, and never in a condescending way, I hope. Always in an empathetic way, fully aware of my own dysfunctions and all of our dysfunctions.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.